Hey YouTube, I'm Ro and this is my Achilles tendon rupture journey. I'm recording this video because I think it will be useful. I'm trying to provide the most dense content in these videos, having watched so much and thinking it would be nice if a lot of this information was sat in one place. So the first thing I want to say is you might want to watch these videos back at ×2 speed on YouTube. That's what I've been doing because I've been watching so many other vlogs and channels, which I will recommend. I might chuck them in the notes, so just keep an eye on the notes for these videos. If I think anything's going to be useful, I'll come back and throw it in. But that's what I've been doing, so you may want to think about that. Just for full disclosure, I'm recording this particular video at the start of my 3rd week, so I'm actually going back. I think it's really useful because I can bring so much more into this conversation, but it's also going to follow generally my journey, so I'm not going to try and bring week 2 things into week 1 unless I think they're useful. So that being said, I think it's useful to know I injured my foot being historically a squash player, but actually on a badminton court, where generally the thing that happened was I thought someone kicked me. There's a video if you're still trying to decide on going down to A&E if you think you've got an Achilles rupture that I recorded before this, so go watch that. But really just get yourself down to A&E. And the next video is going to be following my journey on kind of decisions I want to make in terms of treatment going forward. So you would have heard in the last video that if you get into a cast fairly soon, within 48 to 72 hours, you have more options available to you. And if you present later than that, then you may be going down a particular route. It will all depend on your age, the things you want to be doing in the future. So I'm going to cover some of that in the second video. I'd also advise, and the same thing as me when you're watching vlog, you can always skip ahead. And I would skip ahead at least 2 or 3 weeks, because one of the biggest parts of this that I find stressful is the uncertainty around it. I'm going to try and help with a lot of that information here so you don't experience the same uncertainty I had going through the NHS. But skip ahead and you'll find out more information, and it should hopefully make you feel more at ease. I would say just based on that as well, I'm going through the NHS. I find myself in a period of time where I've actually left a career behind, gone through a big lifestyle change and work change. I'm now a freelance self-employed person, where I was in finance before, and I find myself in this particular period without private medical cover. So I'm going through NHS initially, and I'll talk more about that and my experiences soon. But I think the thing I can add from kind of week 2 into this week 1 is, and I'll talk about it in the mistakes section a bit later, is to get the best sort of medical advice you can when you need to within your budget. I think if you're going through private, many of the vloggers I've seen, people get seen a lot sooner. You might get your ultrasound a lot sooner, and you might be making decisions quicker. So I think this video is still really relevant for you and the future ones. You just might want to skip ahead or watch this and go ahead, just because you'll get information that you'll be making decisions on sooner. Again, this is just my experience. None of this is advice, and I'm sharing it with you, hopefully for your benefit. So I'm going to keep looking at my notes because I want this to be quite concise. So we're going, so my process, my experience was I went to A&E on the day I got injured. I got put into an equinus position. That's to protect your foot from healing long. So if you don't and your foot is kind of flexing a lot, the gap between your Achilles tendon and calf muscle is just going to expand, and it's going to heal long, and that is almost unreversible without surgery. You're better off healing short, and then you can undo the kind of shortness of the muscle by stretching and strengthening in the future. That's basically your rehab protocol post-surgery, or whether you go the conservative route. We're going to talk options a little bit later. So my experience was A&E. I went really late at night, so I had to go back to ambulatory care the next day, because one of the risks of immobilizing your foot is blood clots. So the risk of DVT, so deep vein thrombosis, is higher. So you might get prescribed a blood thinner from your physician. I went to A&E the next day, and I had blood work done, I had blood pressure done, just to check everything was functioning, liver function, kidney function well, so they could prescribe me the blood thinners. I got my blood thinners. I got self-administered injections. So I'm not super great with injections, but I'm not bad. They've actually not been as bad as I thought, and they don't feel as bad as blood being taken. But it's a weird experience doing it yourself. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't want to feel like I'm giving advice on how to do that. But you can feel free to ask questions, and in the comments I will try to, of course, answer and share your experiences. The comment section on other videos has been so useful to me. In terms of NHS, it's been made me quite anxious, and I'm not an anxious person because I went to A&E, they put the cast on and sent me away, didn't really tell me how to even use crutches. I almost slipped walking out of the door, just partly my own fault going too quickly. Didn't really tell me about the process, and I was waiting to hear back from the fracture clinic. No one called me for the first 2 days. I called them. I didn't get a response on the phone lines. I actually went into the fracture clinic the next day after A&E because I was already in the hospital going to ambulatory care to get my blood thinners. And they wouldn't really speak to me and sent me home. They called me on the Friday. I got injured on a Sunday. After multiple calls, and I think the only reason they called me was because I kept chasing them up and I emailed to tell me that they hadn't been able to give me an appointment. Long story short, I got a call the next week on Tuesday to say I had an appointment that Friday. No, even on Wednesday, the next week I had an appointment on Friday. And just no information really given during that period. So in terms of process, I would say I was really anxious because I didn't know what to do and how quickly I had to be seen. The general protocol is to put your foot into a cast in the equinus position for at least 2 weeks. There's other methods, but generally that's the one that most people follow. You can go into a boot sooner, but they tend not to do that, just so you take your injury a little bit more seriously and things are kind of just solidified for a 2-week period where you can't mess up and hit your foot, which you're probably more at risk at when you just happened. So not much happens during that 2-week period. An ultrasound needs to be done. It's probably better sooner rather than later. I've heard some surgeons don't even ultrasound. They can tell from touching and feeling the muscle. But that will confirm the length of the tear, the gap of the tear, the depth of the tear. So that needs to be done. For me, that was done at the week 2. And if you're private, that's probably going to be done way sooner. People I've heard about on private care have had their ultrasound and have been operated on the week after their injury. I'm going most probably, actually, to be honest, at this point in time, I don't actually even know into week 3 which approach I'll be using, and I'll touch more on that later. If you're in the private route, you've got to make that decision a lot quicker, which might seem a lot more daunting, but also there's perhaps negatives if you end up going down the surgery route of having surgery later when things have already started to heal. Again, I'll try and cover this in a later video. So that's pretty much it. So that was my first week in terms of experience. What next is just to get ultrasound. You're going to have to be making decisions on what route you go down, whether that's conservative or surgery. And the 2 conservative routes, there's kind of a historical one that keeps you in a cast for a really long time, 6 weeks. And then there's a functional conservative route, which I think is the better one. Again, see the next video where I'll talk about more about that. So just be mindful there's not just 2 approaches, there are 2 kind of avenues in the conservative approach. I didn't get the best advice when I finally got my NHS appointment. So I am actually pursuing more advice, and one of the biggest mistakes that I made, I think, is having now decided to go and get private medical advice I'm paying for, not to have done that sooner. It would have been the same cost and I would have got seen sooner in the process. So that would definitely be a point I would raise with you. I would also say your care and treatment's going to depend on whether you're getting private or NHS, and then your budget. And your budget's going to dictate what you're able to buy. I've seen a lot of people spending money on all sorts of contraptions and things that I don't want to spend money on because I just don't have a huge budget for it. Even going down the private medical route is coming at a big sort of financial sacrifice for me. But I also would say try and think long term, not short term. And at this point in this video, I would say the way you maybe want to think about what treatment you'll go for is to ask yourself the question, what would I regret or be disappointed that I wouldn't be able to do in the future? And everyone's answer for that is going to differ depending on age, activity levels, and other stuff. So that should be it. And the other thing I would say is try and think longer term in terms of budget. So we spend so much money on smartphones and other stuff these days. This is obviously your health, something that's far more significant and going to have a payback period that's so much longer. I'm 35, so whatever I spend on this, I can then just divide that by the number of years or months or whatever I want to do that the impact of this will have. So again, it will depend on how much budget you have in the short term, but I'm mentally framing it as a cost, not based on today or this year, but something that will give me access. That would I be willing to pay this for, I don't know, the next 10 years on a yearly, monthly basis to be able to, I don't know, heal quickly or get the best result from this. The other thing worth noting here is your first year of recovery seems to be really important in terms of your final result. So whether you go surgery or conservative route, just look after and really focus on recovery in this first year. It seems to dictate how your recovery in the future past 1 year will be. The most of the recovery is done now, and it dictates how and what level you get to in the future. I would say the other things worth noting in this video, so I think the things we'll struggle with to begin with is control. So we're now in an element, the highest things that cause us stress are control and uncertainty. We don't have much control over certain things, so focus on the things you can control, and uncertainty is going to be a little bit greater. And this time you're making between decisions before you decide which route you're taking, there's more uncertainty. So I would just say just get more comfortable with the things you can control, your recovery, your ability to make a decision, and then just push forward with that. You're going to be making way more decisions to do basic things. So I think frustration levels will generally increase. They have for me with certain things, like just going for a shower, trying to make a cup of tea, trying to get a cup of tea to a table requires so much more thought than it did before, where it was just automatic. So just try and take a break and slow down a little bit. And I think this injury is almost a big sign of needing to slow down and make a bit more rational and safe decisions for ourselves. So the other thing I would say is a mistake and to be mindful of is the physical aspect. So once you get onto crutches, you're going, depending on your strength and your ability, it will dictate how the next few weeks go and what decisions you need to make. I'm quite strong in my upper body, so crutches have been fine for me. But I will say, think about something called DOMS, which is the fact that, after a really hard workout, that in the past, tends to take 2 days before you really feel those aches. So I went pretty hard on the crutches. I went to hospital and I must have walked over 1 kilometer on crutches the next day, just going between the different various wards I needed to. And my Achilles and calf and leg really started sort of speaking back to me 2 days later, like, you need to take a rest. So make sure you realize when you're being more active because of life or things you need to do, and just make sure you prioritize recovery of not just the injured leg, but the rest of the body that's now taking on way more load. The Achilles injury itself for me wasn't painful. The explanations that people have given, which makes completely sense, is if something tears, there's no longer a connection there, so actually there's no pain really to be given. The pain kind of mechanism in the body is when you're about to tear something to stop you doing it. So if it's totally torn, you won't feel that much pain. And my Achilles injury hasn't been massively painful. I'm going to stop this video soon and then do a part 2. The other thing I would say is whether you're in a cast or a boot, it's so incredibly important to keep it on and not get frustrated by it. The biggest benefit I have seen has been in my sleep. I have, for some reason, wanted to flinch. I don't know if it's my body just saying, I haven't moved this thing in a while, let me just check I can still move it. Or I'm dreaming, and in my dreams I'm just walking like a normal person and I'm waking up. But there's a few times I've really flinched and really wanted to pull this foot back into a normal sort of walking or running or jumping position. I've felt it a little bit, and thankfully there's been a cast there to stop it. So if you get to a point where you have more control and you're in a boot, just put up with the inconvenience of having a boot to protect against you messing this up. It's not going to take long for you to completely reverse weeks and weeks of recovery. It will take seconds of falling off something. which I'm going to talk about more in the second video. So I will see you in that one.